Hi, I'm Paul Wilson. I'm the creator of Swing Machine Golf and the director of the Paul Wilson Golf School at Bears Best Las Vegas. In this tip, I want to talk about your hip turn and how much you're supposed to be doing as you take the golf club back. Now, what I commonly hear are people trying to turn their hips more to get a better backswing position. Now, I did a tip a little while back about coiling your upper body into the backswing. Now, I base the golf swing on the creation of torque and forces. Torque is something that is very repeatable in life as well as forces. They repeat 100% of the time in life. So I'm trying to base the swing on these two things. The torque is seen in your body. You're coiling your upper body and then you're uncoiling your lower body. Connected to that coiling action are your arms and the golf club. So they'll move along or follow that rotational movement. Now, as we coil back into our backswing, what we're trying to do is we're trying to create this torque or this tight, wound up feeling. In that process, we're allowing our shoulders to move our hips for us. So someone that's trying to move their hips in their backswing to try and generate more power is really going against themselves. Yes, it can feel like you've got more power doing that, but the problem is you start to lose the torque that we're trying to create. So you end up in a position where you're going to be hitting the golf ball with your hands and arms because this coiling action is not going to be created properly. So what I'm getting at is, if I take this head cover here and I coil up only the top of the head cover, which represents your body. The top of the head cover is your shoulders, the lower portion is your feet. If I take the top of this head cover and I coil it up to 90 degrees, the middle, right here on this head cover, moves half of the amount that I'm turning the top. So that means that if I was turning my shoulders 90 degrees, my shoulders would move my hips 45 degrees. Halfway between my hips and the ground would move 22.5 degrees. So we've got a ratio there between the shoulders and hips and knees to the ground. So each is moving half of the other. So the shoulders are moving 90, the hips move half, the knees move half of that, and the feet are the base. Okay, so if you are in a position where you are going like this and turning your hips in your swing, what's going to happen is they're going to end up turning at about 60 degrees. Your knees end up going to about 45 degrees, and on a 90-degree shoulder rotation, that's not going to generate the torque necessary to create a repeatable movement in our swing. So we don't want to be physically turning our hips. We want our shoulders to turn our hips for us. Now, a telltale sign that you're turning too much, if we look at it from this angle here, if somebody turns their hips too much, what happens is this leg tends to straighten, and you can see right between their legs here. So you start to see light right between their legs. Now, if I was going to keep my lower body stable and I allow my shoulders to turn my lower body for me, you would not be able to see between there. That's because this angle is only 22.5 degrees and this is 45 on a 90-degree shoulder angle. So from this angle, what we're trying to do is we're trying to coil only our shoulders, keeping our lower body very stable. In that process, the middle or our hips will turn back the correct amount every single time. Now, I know that turning your hips gives you a powerful feeling, and that is because when we go like this and we turn our hips too much, it allows our golf club to go back too far. So now you're in a position where you feel like you've got a lot of power to hit the golf ball, but you're only doing so with your hands and arms. So although that is a powerful feeling, you're really going to hit the ball all over the place. You're never going to generate the consistency that is necessary to play consistent golf. So like I said, what we're trying to do is we're trying to coil our upper and uncoil our lower. So as an example of how little your hips should be moving, I just want you to pay attention to my belt buckle here. So if this is the ball here, and this right here is 90 degrees, my hips would be turning to that ball right there. That's 45 degrees. Okay, so here's my hips right here, and there's my belt buckle. If I take this belt buckle and turn it to that ball, I'm done. Okay, that's all I'm moving right there. That's about 3 inches of movement. Okay, so this is how little your hips should be moving in your backswing to get in a position where you have turned 45 degrees. So right here, if I go like that, I'm done. That's it. I don't have to do this big hip turn. Okay, all I'm doing is I'm coiling this, coiling my shoulders, and my hips are moving into the proper position all on their own. Okay, so if you're someone trying to turn your hips too much, I want you to stop doing that immediately, because that's not going to create the torque. I think you now understand why that is going to be detrimental to your golf swing. We're going to brace our lower body, and we're going to be thinking of our shoulders. We take our shoulders and we allow them to turn our hips for us. If we've got a mirror or a video camera at home, you want to shoot it from this angle here, just freeze frame it, play it back, and watch for the gap between your knees. If there's a gap there between your knees, you are definitely moving the hips too much. So in that case, brace your lower body, take the golf club back like this. So right here, just keep looking for a flex in this right knee and no gap between there. Okay, so you just brace your lower, turn your upper, and that will allow your hips to move into the correct position. Okay, just one final thing. As you do that, you definitely will feel tight. Okay, just like me coiling up that head cover, the head cover started to get tight. Don't avoid that feeling. That is the correct feeling. We're going to be using that tightness to hit our shots. So we coil up and then we uncoil like I demonstrated in the previous tips. Okay, so for today, just really try to stabilize your hips, and you're going to feel a lot more torque, which will give you a lot more consistent shots. Okay, make sure you ask your questions, post your comments below. I'll try to get to as many as I can.